Sometimes, the hardest truths to uncover are the ones sitting right in front of you. That's a lesson I learned the hard way, by investigating someone I thought I knew better than anyone else. Being a private investigator isn't as glamorous as the movies make it seem. I don't drive a vintage car or chase down suspects in back alleys. Most of the time, it's sitting in my car with cold coffee, waiting for someone to screw up. 9 times out of 10, they do. I've been in this line of work for over a decade, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Everyone has secrets. The guy who hires you to tail his wife? He's probably hiding something too. The woman suspicious of her husband's late-night work meetings? Chances are, she's got skeletons in her closet as well. But this story isn't about them. It's about me. Or rather, it's about how my picture-perfect life came crashing down when I least expected it. My wife, Laren, and I had been married for 8 years. She was a nurse, calm under pressure, compassionate to a fault. We met through a mutual friend at a barbecue, and it didn't take long for me to realize she was way out of my league. Somehow, I convinced her otherwise, and the rest is history. Our life was normal, comfortable. I had my cases, she had her shifts, and we had our Sunday mornings with pancakes and reruns of old sitcoms. If I'm being honest, I liked the predictability. My job gave me enough drama. I didn't need it at home. That's probably why I didn't see it coming. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the case came in. A guy named Paul walked into my office. A stocky, nervous type who kept fidgeting with his wedding ring. He said he thought his wife was cheating on him, but when I asked for details, he clammed up. That's another thing about this job. Most people don't want to admit how bad it is until they absolutely have to. I just need to know for sure, he said, sliding a photo across the desk. Her name's Melanie. I glanced at the picture. Blonde, mid-30s. The kind of polished suburban look that screamed book club wine nights. I took the case. It seemed straightforward enough. The next few days were routine. I tracked Melanie to her gym, the grocery store, and a few boutique shops. Nothing suspicious. On day 4, she met up with a man at a cafe. They sat in the corner, leaning in close, and the way she touched his arm told me all I needed to know. Paul didn't take the news well, but he paid me promptly. Another case closed. I didn't think much of it until a week later, when the next client walked in. This one was different. He was polished, confident, and he got straight to the point. I need you to look into someone for me, he said, placing a photo on the desk. I picked it up, expecting the usual. But my heart stopped. The woman in the picture wasn't a stranger. It was Laren, my wife. I stared at the photo of Laren, my wife of 8 years, sitting innocently on my desk. The client, let's call him Mr. Clean Cut, was still talking, but his words sounded like static. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought he might hear it. Let's just say she's been acting strange, he said, leaning forward. I need to know what she's really up to. I nodded, my expression carefully neutral. This wasn't my first time hearing these lines. Suspicion, paranoia, jealousy, they all hit the same beats. Except this time it was different, because this wasn't some stranger in the photo. This was my wife. What makes you think something's off? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Inside, I was screaming. She's secretive. She disappears for hours. Doesn't always answer her phone. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I know this sounds paranoid, but I have a gut feeling. I've seen her at events. She's always so polished, you know? But there's something about her. I just can't shake the feeling that she's hiding something. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But I couldn't. Instead, I asked the next logical question. How do you know her? We met at a fundraiser last month, he said casually. Just small talk, but I've seen her at a few others since then. She's got this energy about her. Confident, mysterious. He paused, as if he was choosing his next words carefully. She mentioned she was married. But, I don't know. Something feels off. I clenched my jaw, so hard it hurt. Fundraisers? Laren never mentioned going to any fundraisers. And you think she's involved with someone else? I forced myself to ask. Possibly, he said with a shrug. Maybe not. I just need to know what's real and what isn't. I stared at him for a long moment, then forced myself to nod. All right, I'll take the case. The words felt like sandpaper in my throat. That night, I sat in my car outside the grocery store, the photo of Laren burning a hole in my pocket. I told myself a dozen lies to justify what I was about to do. Maybe this guy had the wrong person. Maybe he was delusional. Maybe this was all some ridiculous coincidence. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let it go. I'd built my career on finding the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Turning a blind eye now felt wrong. When I got home, Laren was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She smiled when she saw me, her face lighting up the way it always did. "Hey, how was work?" she asked. Same old," I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. Her skin was warm, familiar, safe. She didn't look like someone with secrets. She looked like my wife. Later that night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I told myself I wasn't doing this because I doubted her. I was doing it because it was my job, because if I didn't investigate, someone else would. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was terrified of what I might find. The next morning, I left the house earlier than usual. Laren was still in bed, her hair a mess, one hand curled under her pillow. I stared at her for a moment longer than I should have, then slipped out the door. I told myself this was just a routine case. I'd done this 100 times before, track their movements, take notes, get the proof, or lack thereof, and report back to the client. It was straightforward, professional. But this wasn't a normal case, and we both knew it. For the first few days, I followed Laren through her usual routine. She worked long shifts at the hospital, grabbed coffee on her breaks, and sometimes stopped by the grocery store on her way home. I kept my distance, careful not to tip her off. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. By the end of day 3, I was starting to feel like an idiot. Maybe Mr. Clean Cut really was just paranoid. Maybe this was all one big misunderstanding. And then, on the morning of day 4, she did something different. Instead of heading straight to the hospital, Laren took a detour. She drove out of town, heading toward the city, and pulled into the parking lot of a little cafe I didn't recognize. I parked a block away, watching as she stepped inside. For a moment, I thought she might just be grabbing breakfast. But then, about 10 minutes later, a man walked in. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident stride. He spotted her immediately, and she smiled when he approached. Not the polite smile she gave strangers, but something warmer, familiar. I grabbed my camera from the passenger seat and snapped a few photos through the windshield, my hands shaking slightly. They sat down at a corner table, close enough to lean in and talk quietly, but far enough away from everyone else that no one would overhear. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but their body language told its own story. The way she tilted her head when he spoke, the way his hand briefly brushed hers across the table. It was subtle, but it was there. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I'd seen this scene play out 100 times before, but it had never felt like this. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, knowing there was nothing you could do to stop it. When they finally stood up to leave, I snapped a few more photos, careful to keep my distance. They didn't hug or kiss, but there was an intimacy in the way they moved together, an ease that didn't belong to strangers. Back in my car, I stared at the photos on my camera. The evidence was vague, but it was enough to make my heart race. This didn't mean anything, I told myself. People have friends. People meet for coffee. There was no proof this was more than that. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the image of Laren's smile as she sat across from him. It was a smile I thought I knew, a smile I thought belonged to me. The days that followed were a blur of routine and unease. I continued tailing Laren, but now every little detail felt loaded with meaning. Was she checking her phone more often? Did she seem more distracted? Or was I just seeing what I expected to see? I kept telling myself I needed answers, but the truth was I was spiraling. The weight of what I was doing, spying on the woman I loved, was eating me alive. Still, I couldn't stop. After the cafe meeting, I focused on the man she'd been with. I had photos of him, clear enough to pick out details. His watch, the cut of his suit, the confident way he carried himself. A quick online search led me to his name, Evan Greer. He was involved in nonprofit work, specifically organizing fundraisers for children's hospitals. It made sense. Laren had mentioned getting involved in some charity events through work, but I'd never thought much of it. She was always the kind of person who wanted to help others. But now, every mention of those events felt like a puzzle piece sliding into place. I dug deeper into Evan's life. His social media was pristine, filled with polished photos of charity galas and handwritten thank you notes from donors. If he had any skeletons in his closet, he wasn't advertising them. But there was one detail that caught my attention. He worked primarily in the city, the same city Laren had driven to for their meeting. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me looking. A few days later, I got my first real break. Laren had another day off, and instead of staying home or running errands, she headed into the city again. This time, I was ready. I followed her car at a safe distance, my palms sweating against the steering wheel. She parked in the same lot as before, but didn't go into the cafe. Instead, she walked a few blocks to a small office building. I parked nearby and waited. Nearly an hour passed before she came out with Evan. They were talking as they walked, their heads close together, and I caught it again, the way her face softened when she looked at him. She laughed at something he said, and he placed a hand on her arm for just a second too long. My chest tightened, but I kept my camera steady, snapping photos as they crossed the street and disappeared into a nearby restaurant. When I got home that night, I couldn't sit still. The photos from that day told me something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't a coincidence. Later, as Laren was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But now, I couldn't help myself. I glanced at the screen. It was a text, and the name on it stopped me cold. Evan. The message was short, but it was enough to send my thoughts racing. Great seeing you today. Looking forward to the weekend. I stared at the screen until the water in the shower stopped running. Then I placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it and tried to act normal. But I wasn't normal. Not anymore. By Friday night, I'd worked myself into a knot of nerves and paranoia. Evan's text, looking forward to the weekend, played on repeat in my head. What was happening this weekend? Why hadn't Laren mentioned it? I needed to know. A few hours of online digging gave me my answer. A charity gala, hosted by none other than Evan Greer. It was a fundraiser for the children's hospital where Laren worked. The event was black tie, invite only, and very public. It wasn't exactly the setting for a secret rendezvous, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Laren hadn't said a word about attending. Why keep it from me if it was just another work function? I didn't ask her about it. Instead, I spent Saturday prepping for a stakeout. That evening, I parked my car a block away from the venue, a sleek downtown hotel with a red carpet entrance and a string of luxury cars pulling up to the valet. Guests in gowns and tuxedos flowed through the double doors, glittering under the lights. I spotted Laren almost immediately. She stepped out of a cab, wearing a dark green dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and she looked stunning. My chest tightened as I snapped a photo from across the street. She didn't come here alone. Evan greeted her at the entrance, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo. They exchanged a brief hug, friendly, but close enough to make my stomach churn. I watched as he guided her inside, his hand resting lightly on her back. For the next hour, I stayed parked outside, my mind racing. I didn't know what I expected to see, but the sight of them together was already more than I could handle. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a blazer from the back seat, smoothed my hair in the mirror, and walked in. The ballroom was a sea of glittering chandeliers and clinking champagne glasses. I stuck to the edges of the room, keeping my distance but always keeping Laren in my sights. She was at ease, moving through the crowd with a practiced grace, her arm occasionally brushing against Evan's as they mingled. Most of their interactions seemed professional, introducing guests, thanking donors, but every so often, there was a moment, a glance that lingered too long, a shared laugh that felt too intimate. Toward the end of the night, things took a turn. I followed them out to a quieter terrace overlooking the city. Laren leaned against the railing, holding a glass of wine, while Evan stood close beside her. They talked quietly, the buzz of the crowd fading into the background. Then it happened. Laren reached out, her fingers brushing his arm in a way that wasn't casual. He turned toward her, leaning in slightly, his face close to hers. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss her. My grip on the camera tightened, my pulse hammering in my ears. But then, just as quickly, Laren pulled back. She said something I couldn't hear, and the moment broke. Evan nodded, his expression unreadable, and they turned to go back inside. I stayed rooted to the spot, the cool night air doing nothing to calm the fire in my chest. Whatever was happening between them wasn't innocent. It wasn't casual. And it wasn't over. I couldn't shake the image of Laren and Evan on that terrace, the way she smiled at him, the way he leaned in. It was like a splinter lodged in my mind, impossible to ignore. When she casually mentioned running errands the next morning, I knew I couldn't let it go. I waited until she left, then grabbed my keys and followed. At first, her stop seemed harmless: coffee shop, dry cleaners, pharmacy. But then she headed downtown, the same direction as before. My chest tightened as I followed her to a boutique hotel. She parked in the garage, and I found a spot a block away, careful not to get too close. After a few minutes, she emerged from the garage, Evan walking beside her. They headed toward the hotel entrance, deep in conversation. I stayed back, my camera ready, snapping photos of every move. The way she looked at him, the way he leaned toward her, it wasn't friendly. Then something shifted. Laren glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the street. For a moment, I thought she'd spotted me, but she didn't stop. Her gaze landed on something else. I followed her line of sight and froze. A black SUV was parked across the street. The driver, wearing sunglasses, was staring directly at me. My stomach flipped. Was he watching her? Or me? The SUV's engine roared to life, and it started moving. I quickly ducked back into my car, my heart pounding. The SUV followed me the second I pulled into traffic. It stuck close, its grille filling my rearview mirror. I took a sharp turn, then another, trying to lose it. My hands gripped the wheel, so hard my knuckles turned white. Come on, I muttered under my breath. Finally, I spotted an alley. I swerved into it, killed my lights, and waited. My pulse thundered in my ears as the SUV sped past, oblivious to where I'd gone. I exhaled sharply and pulled back onto the street, heading straight home. But when I got there, relief quickly turned to fury. Evan's car was parked in my driveway. I stormed inside, my heart pounding. Laren and Evan were in the living room, standing too close for comfort. "Jake," Laren said, startled. "What are you doing here?" "I live here," I snapped, my eyes locked on Evan. "What the hell is he doing in my house?" Evan raised his hands, his tone calm. "It's not what you think." "Oh, I'm sure it's exactly what I think," I shot back, stepping toward him. "Jake, stop." Laren stepped between us, her voice firm but trembling. "Evan, just go." "Laren," he started, but she cut him off. I said go. Evan hesitated, glancing between us. "Fine," he muttered, brushing past me on his way to the door. As he passed, he leaned in just enough to whisper, "You don't know the half of it." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. The door clicked shut, leaving Laren and me alone. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked, my voice low and sharp. She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. "Jake, Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. We both glanced at it. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. "Evan." I stared at her, waiting for an explanation, but she said nothing. The silence between us was deafening. By the time Laren left the house the next day, I was ready. I couldn't sit back any longer, waiting for the truth to come to me. I needed answers. Before she walked out the door, I hugged her goodbye, letting my hand linger on her jacket just long enough to clip the tiny mic to the inside of her collar. She didn't notice. I felt sick to my stomach doing it, but I told myself it was the only way. As soon as her car pulled away, I rushed to my own. My phone was already connected to the mix feed, the signal clear. I followed her downtown to a small park tucked behind an office complex. She parked her car and walked to a bench under a tree, where Evan was already waiting. "Thanks for meeting me," Laren said, her voice trembling slightly. "What choice did I have?" Evan replied. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, parked a safe distance away. Their voices came through the feed like they were sitting next to me. "You think he suspects?" Evan asked. "He knows something's wrong," Laren admitted. "He's been acting different, watching me more closely." Evan swore under his breath. "We need to be careful. If he figures this out." "I know," Laren interrupted. "But I don't think he has proof." "Not yet." "Proof of what?" My mind raced as I strained to hear every word. Evan leaned closer to her, his voice dropping. "We should lay low for a while. Let things cool down." Laren nodded reluctantly. "I hate this, Evan. I hate lying to him." "You don't have a choice," Evan snapped. "Not after what happened." "What happened?" I muttered under my breath, my pulse pounding. Laren dropped her head into her hands. I just want this to be over. You knew the risks, Evan said coldly. He's too close now. We need to figure this out before it all falls apart. That was it. I couldn't sit in the car anymore. I slammed the door behind me and strode toward them, my footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Laren turned first, her face going pale when she saw me. Jake, she stammered, standing up. What are you doing here? Evan rose to his feet, his expression hardening. You followed her? You're damn right I did, I snapped, stopping a few feet away. What the hell is going on? What are you two hiding from me? Jake, it's not what you think, Laren said quickly, stepping toward me. Don't, I said, my voice sharp. Don't you dare lie to me again. Evan raised his hands defensively. Look, this isn't the place. Shut up, I shouted, pointing at him. You don't get to talk. I want to hear it from her. Laren's eyes filled with tears, her lip trembling. Jake, I can explain. Then explain. Her silence spoke louder than words. You think you're going to lay low until I stop looking? I spat, throwing her own words back at her. You think I'll just let this go? Evan took a step forward, his jaw tight. You need to calm down. Stay out of this, I snarled. This is between me and my wife. You don't understand what's happening, Evan said. Then make me understand. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Laren whispered, Jake, I'm sorry. Sorry for what? I demanded. For lying? For sneaking around? Tears streamed down her face as she said the words that shattered me completely. For everything. Laren's words hung in the air. I'm sorry. Sorry. I snapped. That's it? That's all you have to say? She looked down, tears streaming down her cheeks. Evan stood silently, his hands clenched at his sides, like he was bracing for impact. Start talking, I said, pointing at her. What's going on? Jake, it's not what you think, she said, her voice trembling. Then tell me what it is, I shot back. Did you sleep with him? No, she shouted, her voice cracking. It's not like that. I laughed bitterly. Not like that? Then what is it, Laren? Evan finally spoke. It wasn't physical. She just needed someone to talk to. I turned to him, my blood boiling. Don't you dare try to justify yourself. You don't get to play the good guy here. I'm not. Shut up. I cut him off, my fists clenched. Jake, stop, Laren said, stepping between us. No. I want the truth, I said, staring at her. Why not talk to me? Her voice wavered. Because you stopped listening to me? What? You're never here, Jake, she shouted, tears in her eyes. You're always working, always chasing other people's secrets. And when you're home, you're somewhere else. I needed someone, and Evan was there. I stared at her, stunned. So this is my fault? No, she said softly. I'm not blaming you. I was lonely, and Evan, he listened. My stomach churned. So you what? Became best friends? It wasn't like that, she insisted. But Evan made a fatal mistake. Tell him about the kiss, Laren. The words hit me like a punch. What did you say? I growled. Laren's face went pale. Evan, stop. No, I said coldly. Let's hear it. Tell me about the kiss. It was a mistake, she blurted, tears streaming down her face. It happened once, and it didn't mean anything. I laughed, hollow and bitter. A mistake? And you didn't think to mention it? I didn't want to lose you, Jake, she cried. You already lost me the second you let him touch you, I said, my voice breaking. Evan stepped forward. Jake, I'm sorry. None of this was supposed to happen. You're sorry? I turned on him. That's supposed to fix this? Jake, please, Laren said, grabbing my arm. I made a mistake, but I love you. I need you to believe that. I shook her off, my heart pounding. Believe you? After this? I don't even know who you are anymore. Her sobs filled the silence as I turned and walked away. In my car, I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. I didn't know where I was going, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. I slammed the door behind me when I got home, the sound echoing through the empty house. My mind was a storm of anger and betrayal. I wanted answers, closure, something to make sense of everything Laren and Evan had said. But the house was quiet, and she wasn't there. An hour passed, then another. I was sitting in the darkened living room, nursing a drink, when I heard the faint creak of the back door. I shot to my feet, my pulse racing. Footsteps echoed through the kitchen, hesitant but purposeful. I crept closer, my heart pounding, and peeked around the corner. It was Laren. She was back. Her hair was disheveled, and she was clutching a duffel bag. She didn't notice me as she darted into the bedroom. "What the hell are you doing?" I said, stepping into view. Laren froze, her back to me. Slowly, she turned, her eyes wide with fear. "Jake, I didn't think you'd be here." "No kidding," I said, crossing my arms. "Care to explain why you're sneaking into our house in the middle of the night?" "I just came to get some things," she said quickly, clutching the duffel bag tighter. "What things?" I snapped. "What's in the bag?" "It's none of your business," she said, her voice shaking. "None of my. Are you serious right now?" I stepped closer, blocking her path to the door. "You're going to stand there and act like this isn't my business?" "Jake, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to please me. Not after everything you've done." She tried to push past me, but I grabbed her arm. The duffel bag slipped from her grip and fell to the floor. It landed with a heavy thud, and something metallic clattered inside. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, kneeling to unzip the bag. "Don't," she cried, but it was too late. Inside was a stack of cash, neatly bundled. There were thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands. My stomach churned as I looked up at her. "What is this, Laren? Where did this come from?" Before she could answer, headlights flooded the living room window. A car door slammed, and my stomach dropped. "Stay here," I said, grabbing the bag as I headed for the door. I opened it to find Evan standing on the porch. His face fell when he saw me, and for a split second, he looked like a deer in headlights. "You've got some nerve," I said, stepping onto the porch. "Jake, listen." "No, you listen," I growled, shoving the bag toward him. "What the hell is this?" Evan glanced at the bag, then at me. "It's not what you think." "Of course it's not," I said bitterly. "That's the tagline for this whole mess, isn't it?" Before he could respond, I grabbed him by the collar. "Start talking, or I swear to God." Evan shoved me back, and I stumbled into the railing. My grip on him tightened, and we both went crashing to the ground. The fight was brutal and messy. Fists flew, and we rolled across the porch like wild animals. Somewhere in the chaos, I heard Laren screaming for us to stop, but I didn't care. I wasn't stopping until I got answers. Finally, I pinned him to the ground, my fist raised. "Tell me the truth," I shouted. "All right," he gasped, blood trickling from his lip. "I'll tell you." I froze, my chest heaving. "Just let him up, Jake," Laren pleaded, her voice trembling. I hesitated, then released him. Evan sat up, wiping blood from his mouth. "It's not just about her," he said, his voice low. "It's about you." "Me?" I demanded. Evan nodded. "You don't know the whole story, but you're about to find out." Laren's face was pale as she whispered, "Jake, I'm so sorry." The silence after Laren's words was deafening. My fists clenched at my sides as I looked between her and Evan, waiting for someone to explain. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice cold and sharp. Laren hesitated, her gaze darting to Evan. He nodded slightly, as if giving her permission. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she began, her voice trembling. "But Evan, he didn't come into my life by accident." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "He approached me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He told me things about you, Jake. Things I didn't know how to handle." "Like what?" I snapped. Evan cleared his throat, wiping the blood from his mouth. "You made some enemies in your line of work, Jake. One of them hired me to dig up dirt on you." My stomach sank. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly who," Evan said. "Vincent Crane, the guy whose wife you outed for cheating. He wasn't thrilled about losing half his fortune in the divorce." I remembered Crane well. Wealthy, ruthless, and vengeful. "I don't scare easy," I said, glaring at Evan. "You should," he replied. "Crane's not the kind of man you cross. He wanted to destroy you, and he paid me to do it. When I found out about Laren, well, I saw an opportunity." I turned to Laren, disbelief and anger coursing through me. "You helped him?" "No," she shouted, shaking her head. "At first, I didn't even know what he was doing. He told me things about you, about your work, the risks you take. He made me think you were hiding something dangerous. I didn't know who to trust. You trusted him, I said bitterly. Laren sobbed. I was scared, Jake. I thought I was protecting you. By lying to me? By sneaking around with him? I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. But it did, I said, my voice hard. Evan sighed. Look, Jake, Crane's out of the picture now. He stopped paying me months ago. But I still have the files. What files? I growled. Records of your work. Cases you've taken. Lines you've crossed, he said. They don't paint a pretty picture. Bullshit, I snapped. Maybe, he said with a smirk. But people believe what they're shown. And these files? They could ruin you. Why are you telling me this? Because I want out, Evan said. This has gone too far. I'm walking away. But you need to know. If you come after me, those files go public. I stared at him, my mind racing. Then I turned to Laren. And you? What do you want? She hesitated, her tears falling faster. I want to fix this, Jake. I want to fix us. I laughed bitterly. Us? There is no us, Laren. Not anymore. Her face crumpled as the weight of my words sank in. I turned back to Evan. Get the hell out of my house. He didn't argue. He picked up his bag, gave me one last look, and walked out the door. When it clicked shut, I looked at Laren one final time. You should go too, I said softly. There's nothing left for you here. Jake. Go, I said firmly. She nodded, her shoulders shaking as she picked up her coat and walked out. That night, I sat in the quiet of an empty house, staring at the remnants of my life. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one I got. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just leaves you standing in the rubble.